American public perceptions of Israel seem to be shifting sharply. In 2022, before the October 7th attacks and the war that ensued, 42% of American adults held an unfavorable view of Israel. Today, just 4 years later, that number is up to 60%, according to recent Pew Research polls. And for Americans under the age of 50, that number is even higher. 70% of that population held an unfavorable view of Israel in 2026, up from around 50%, same group in 2022. Joining me now is the Israeli-American historian Omar Bartov. He is the Dean's Professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Brown University. He has a new book out, Israel, What Went Wrong. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So what I want to first focus on is the answer to your question, because for you, both personally and professionally in the book, you think that Israel took a wrong turn on two dimensions, or one of them is a historical one. Explain what it is, what did go wrong?
Right, so what interests me most is how Zionism, which was an ideology of liberation and emancipation for a Jewish minority, 80% of world Jewry, who lived in East Central Europe and came under increasing pressure from nationalism, ethno-nationalism, and eventually anti-Semitism and violence, a movement that said, well, let's define the Jewish people as well as a nation and find a place for them where there would be a majority and have a state of their own. How that movement, especially after 1948, becomes something else, becomes a state ideology that increasingly becomes militaristic, expansionist, violent, and in the last few years, racist, Jewish supremacist, and in Gaza also genocidal. How did that happen? And I try to, there are many answers to this, but I would say that the most important moment is what happens in 1948 itself with the establishment of the state, when Zionism changes from having these two faces, one of liberation from oppression and the other becoming a state ideology of occupation and oppression of others.
So a lot of people would push back and say that in a sense you do have it right, but what you want is the Jews to be permanent victims. That when you look at Jews with power, with a huge army, with a successful country that is outperforming others, that you're deeply uncomfortable with that there is a certain strain of the Israeli left that just doesn't like a very powerful Israel.
I think, one could make that argument. That's not the way I look at it. What is so interesting in the case of Israel is that the more powerful it became, especially after the war of 1973, Israel became the hegemon in its region, became the most powerful country in the region, not least because of American support as well. And it's during that period that the Holocaust, that Israel was seen as the answer to after 1948, becomes not only something that you need to remember and commemorate and study and research, but also an imminent danger, that the country develops a self-perception of a society, a state that is under imminent danger. And that creates in Israel a sense that any danger to any threat, and most of the threats are coming from the people that it occupies, may lead to its destruction. And because of that, it begins giving it infinite license to respond with any kind of violence that it sees appropriate.
You also say that it's the Holocaust is one part of it, and then the occupation has changed Israel. Explain what you mean.
One has to remember that since 1967, when I was 13 years old, to now, when I'm 72, Israel has been an occupying power. Half of the population under Israeli control, and Israel is basically one state from the river to the sea. People living there under different regimes. half of the population, nowadays 7 million Jews, rule over 7 million Palestinians. That process of ruling over people for so long in such great proximity has done something that when I was a teenager and protesting against a very young occupation, we used to say occupation corrupts. We didn't quite know how much it would corrupt and how long it would last. It corrupts society. You dehumanize the people you occupy. You have to, because why are you occupying them? Why are you bossing over them? And that dehumanization of those you're ruling over begins a process of dehumanizing you as a society.